Camilo in another film, The Ground Truth, cry at the end of that film and apologize to the people of Iraq for what he and his comrades in arms did. We want to cheer him tonight for the role that he is now playing as a resistor against this misery. Thank you, Camilo.
Thank you. Thank you, comrades. Thank you. Thank you, comrades, and Iraq Veterans Against the War. And everyone here. The bad news is I didn't finish writing my speech. The good news is I'm still going to read it and wing the rest. So, and I want to start by sharing with you a passage from my book, Road from Ramadi. It's been changed a bit. And this is after an ambush. We went to the site to look for evidence of the ambush, to look for brass and things like that. And this is a moment of reflection while I was in Iraq. I was fascinated by how different Iraqi life was from our own back home and wanted to find out more. The cultural differences were many, beginning with the language and religion, which seemed to dominate their way of life. But another difference was the way they related to one another, even across the different clans and tribes and the different forms of Islam they practiced. There seemed to be a unity that spread through the differences among Iraqis. I wondered if our presence had served to unite them more. If that was the case, I didn't feel very happy about contributing to that unity, which seemed to claim most of its energy from their resistance to us and our occupation. I was captivated by the culture and the people of Iraq, and even though I hated being fired upon, I cannot honestly say that I blamed them. And what's even more curious, I cannot say that amid all the violence and resistance, I ever felt hatred from the people of Iraq. If anything, I regretted the fact that being a U.S. soldier prevented me from experiencing the culture in any significant way. The limited interactions I did have with the local people reinforced my belief that our occupation was wrong. In several conversations I had, both Shias and Sunnis openly told me that Iraqis were perfectly capable of governing their own country without the help of foreign armies. Even those who had been initially happy to see the U.S. military's arrival and who despised Saddam were now saying it was time for Americans to leave Iraq. About a conversation I had with an old Shia man who was upset after having been detained and injured on his knee by U.S. Special Forces. I wrote the following. Part of it is a dialogue. I am really sorry about what happened, I said, switching my attention between my friend Mohammed, who was translating, and his Shia friend. We don't really want to be here. Oh, I know, said Mohammed. He's not upset with you, he said of the old Shia man, but he wants the Americans to leave Iraq. The conversation continued on in that fashion, with complaints about U.S. brutality following rapidly, one after the next, in a way that made the argument that it was all an unfortunate and isolated mistake, not only hard for them to accept, but for me to use. These were all educated men, especially the old man with injury, who seemed to command respect even among the Sunnis, a majority among those present. It occurred to me that the deference shown to him stemmed not just from his wisdom and advanced years, but also because he was perhaps some kind of religious eminence. I felt as though I was at a tribunal judging the American occupation, with me casting the dual role of defense counsel and accused, and the elderly Shia speaking on behalf of the entire Iraqi people. I didn't feel qualified to match my formidable opponent. In spite of his anger about the occupation, the old Shia did not descend to personal attacks on me, engaged instead in a dignified and elegant dialogue about Iraq's right to self-determination. Though he still seemed upset, he was very cordial to me as he left. There is a moral deficiency and a moral disconnect in the larger anti-war movement. We are able to view and condemn the invasion and occupation against the people of Iraq as immoral and criminal. But we choke when it comes to speak about not just the right, but also the ability of the Iraqi people to rise up in arms and fight for their liberation. With about 150,000 US troops in Iraq and over 120,000 mercenaries. Is that right? If it's inaccurate, you can blame Jeremy. But he said that yesterday. With death squads and US-controlled militias operating with absolute impunity in the streets and alleyways of Iraq, with the Pentagon's own figure that up to 80% of attacks are directed against occupation forces, and you can blame John Pilger if that's not accurate. It seems only natural that at the very least we would be skeptical of the idea that Iraq is being torn by sectarian strife. Instead, we repeat the official line that there's a civil war raging between the Tigris and the Euphrates. To say that because of the ages-old split between Shias and Sunnis and because of the violence promoted by the occupation, Iraqis are bombing their own mosques and killing their own children is like saying that because of the split between Catholics and Protestants, where the United States occupied, Baptist Americans would be bombing Catholic churches, or the Jesuits would be killing Jehovah's Witnesses. We would never believe Americans, instead of turning against the occupation, would be killing one another. There is no ages-old war between Shias and Sunnis. In fact, they have intermarried and lived in relative peace and harmony for over 1,400 years. To say that because Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, Sunnis oppress all other Iraqis is like saying that because Bush is a born-again Protestant drunk, Protestants are oppressing all other Americans. What is ages old is civil war as an excuse used by powerful militaries in order to continue occupying the countries that they invade. When talking about the chaos and violence in Iraq, we refer to sectarian strife and civil war. We are doing a disservice to and undermining the struggle of the Iraqi people to fight for their liberation. Even as an occupier, I always knew in my heart that the people of Iraq were able to see me as a human being, in spite of all, and that they realized that the real enemy, even as we fought one another, was way bigger than me and very far from them. It is perhaps that level and quality of humanity that is responsible for my own deficiency, my inability to accept that Iraqis under occupation are killing one another. Maybe there is a civil war in Iraq. Maybe there isn't. If there is, according to the Pentagon, 80% of the violence will end when the occupation ends. But what is certain, at least in my opinion, is that promoting the yet unproven idea that there is a civil war in Iraq is helping the war criminals in the White House to continue justifying the occupation of that country. Those who are against the war, but who somehow still believe in Western divine intervention so that Iraqis don't kill one another, rely on the idea that there is a civil war to continue supporting the occupation of Iraq, which is to support the continued slaughter of American soldiers and Iraqi civilians, close to 1 million and counting. Understanding the Iraqi resistance requires us to view Iraqis and to view ourselves outside of our culture and our religion. We need to put ourselves in their shoes and imagine, if only for a brief moment, that our streets were occupied by the most powerful foreign military on earth. Would we turn against one another? When a bomb goes off by a Shia mosque, that's exactly what it is, a bomb going off by a Shia mosque. Because to my knowledge, no American serviceman or woman, correct me if I'm wrong, IVAW, ever goes to look for IDs on the charred bodies of the bombers. We don't know what happens. We know about the death squads, we know about the Salvador options, we know about the mercenaries. We cannot trust the embedded journalists. We cannot trust the Pentagon spokesperson. We cannot be certain that Iraqis are killing one another. What we do know is that we have a resistance in the United States. What we do know is that we have Iraq veterans against the war. We have a whole bunch of us here. Please stand. We are war resistors. We have been incarcerated for refusing to go back to Iraq. We are in the active duty. We are in the reserves. We are in the bases. We are in the first GI coffee house. We are in the National Guard. We are in every branch of the military. And we are the muscle of the military, and we're going to see to it that the U.S. government can no longer rely on the U.S. military to fight illegal, criminal, and immoral wars of aggression. If it requires more Agustin Aguayos, if it requires more Jeremy Hinsmans in Canada, if it requires more Mark Wilkersons in jail right now serving, then that's exactly what they're going to get. Because we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop until we break down the war machine. We are here to end the war, and we're serious. Thank you for standing with us.